Here's a question nobody wants to answer out loud. If you're earning 500K, 750K, maybe even more, why do you still wake up at 3 a.m. worried about money? You did everything right. You built a portfolio, you got the house, diversified like they told you. So why doesn't it feel safe? If that hits a little too close to home, this video is for you. Because in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why that anxiety gets worse as your wealth grows, and how ultra successful people unknowingly fall into what I call the $3 million trap. More importantly, I'm going to walk you through the same 3-step framework used by institutions, not individuals, to escape it. It's called stack, shield, and scale. It's how you stop trading your time for financial safety and you start building a wealth system that buys back your time instead. Research from Boston College studied 165 households with an average net worth of $78 million. These aren't middle-class families struggling to pay bills. These are ultra-wealthy individuals with more money than most people will see in 10 lifetimes. The study asked a simple question: do you feel financially secure? The answer shocked researchers. Most said no. In fact, they said they'd need 25% more wealth, another $19.5 million on average, before they'd feel truly secure. Think about that. People with $78 million don't feel safe. If you're watching this and you've crossed that $3 million threshold, you probably recognize the same feeling. You're doing everything the experts told you to do. Your income keeps climbing. Your net worth keeps growing, yet somewhere deep inside you still feel exposed. Welcome to what I call the $3 million trap. It's not about the dollar amount. It's about the psychological prison that catches high earners who've confused accumulation with security, who've mistaken net worth for actual wealth, and who remain stuck on an accelerating treadmill no matter how successful they become. Here's what wealthy families and financial institutions understand that individuals don't. True security doesn't come from having more money. It comes from having the right structure. The same research shows something even more disturbing. The higher your net worth climbs, the more anxious you become. It's called the wealth paradox, and it's destroying the lives of successful people who thought money would have set them free. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why hitting that $3 million mark often makes your financial anxiety worse, not better. But more importantly, the good news is I'll reveal the structural approach that institutions use to build true financial security, and how to stack, shield, and scale your wealth using the same principles. By the end, you'll understand why the wealthy feel trapped, how institutional thinking differs from individual planning, and the 3 decisive steps to transform your earned income into a self-funding wealth engine that finally buys back your time, which is the true freedom. But first, let me tell you about someone who learned this lesson the hard way. Let me tell you about somebody named Sarah. Sarah is a management consultant who built a specialized firm serving Fortune 500 companies. After 8 years of 70-hour work weeks, she sold her consulting practice for $4.2 million. Smart, disciplined, did everything her wealth advisor recommended. She diversified the proceeds across index funds and ETFs. She bought a duplex for rental income, maxed out her 401k and her IRA contributions. On paper, Sarah had joined the top 1% of American earners. But here's what Sarah might really say. I have more money than my parents made in their entire lives combined, but I feel more stressed about finances than when I was eating ramen in business school. See, without realizing it, Sarah's lifestyle had inflated to match her new wealth level. The bigger house in the executive neighborhood, 2 kids in private school at $30,000 each, the BMW lease that made sense for business, country club membership for networking, a financial advisor charging 1.2% annually on assets under management. Suddenly, Sarah needed her $4.2 million portfolio to generate nearly $400,000 annually just to maintain her lifestyle. That meant her investments had to perform at nearly 10% annually every year just to break even. Then 2022 happened. Sarah watched her portfolio drop from $4.2 million to $3.1 million in 6 months. That wasn't just numbers on a screen. That was 2 years of private school tuition disappearing. That was her mortgage payments for the next 3 years evaporating. For the first time since selling her business, Sarah couldn't sleep. She started checking her account balance multiple times daily. She snapped at her kids over small expenses. Her husband found her calculating retirement scenarios at 2 a.m. Here's the cruel irony. Sarah had more assets than 99% of Americans, but she still felt less secure than when she was a hungry entrepreneur bootstrapping her first client contracts. Because back then, Sarah controlled her security. She would work harder, deliver more value, sign bigger clients. Her financial safety came from her ability to generate income. But now, her security was entirely dependent on market performance. Forces completely outside of her control, managed by fund companies who collected fees whether she made money or not. This is the essence of trading time for money. Your security depends on outside performance. So your only fallback is to keep working harder or longer. But true wealth means buying back your time so that your money produces income whether you work or not. Sarah had fallen into the $3 million trap. The trap isn't the amount, it's the structure. Sarah had accumulated wealth, but she hadn't built a wealth system. She was still dependent on external performance for her financial security, which meant she was still trading peace of mind for profit potential. And here's the real kicker. The lifestyle inflation that came with her wealth level meant she needed higher and higher returns to feel secure. The higher returns she needed, the more market risk she had to accept. The more risk she accepted, the less secure she actually felt. It becomes a vicious cycle. I've seen it with entrepreneurs worth $5 million, $15 million, even $50 million. The numbers get bigger, but the anxiety never goes away. It just gets more expensive because they're trying to solve an institutional problem with individual solutions. Here's what Sarah didn't understand, and what most successful people never learn. There are two completely different approaches to building wealth in this world. There's the individual approach, optimize for performance, diversify across correlated assets, accept volatility as the price of returns, and hope market timing works in your favor. And then there's the institutional approach. Prioritize survival over performance, engineer liquidity for opportunity capture, and build systems that compound regardless of market conditions. Sarah was playing the individual game in an institutional world. You want to know why I study institutions and teach people to mirror their strategies? Because they're the only financial entities that must survive every crisis. Banks can't just ride out a recession. They need liquidity every single day. Insurance companies can't hope their investments perform well. They have guaranteed obligations to policyholders regardless of market conditions. University endowments can't shut down operations during bear markets. They must fund scholarships and salaries through every economic cycle. So institutions build for permanence, not performance. When Harvard manages its $53.2 billion endowment, they're not hoping the stock market goes up. When Northwestern Mutual manages $359 billion in assets, they're not betting on the next hot sector. When sovereign wealth funds protect entire nations' resources, they don't chase quarterly earnings. They engineer for survival and opportunity. Here's how institutions actually structure their capital, and it's nothing like what your financial advisor probably told you. Institutions maintain what I call true liquidity. Roughly 40 to 60% of their capital is in stable, accessible assets that meet 4 specific criteria simultaneously. They hold value during crashes. They're not correlated to stock market movements. They are accessible without penalties, and they can be leveraged without interrupting their growth. Everything else, the higher return investments, the growth plays, the alternative investments, comes after the foundation is bulletproof. When the 2008 crisis hit, who had capital to acquire distressed assets at massive discounts? Not the diversified investors who lost 40% of their portfolios. It was the institutions with massive liquid reserves who could deploy capital while others were forced to sell. When COVID created buying opportunities in commercial real estate and private credit, who capitalized? The individual investors? They were watching their retirement accounts, hoping for recovery. Here's the fundamental difference. Individuals optimize for returns. Institutions engineer for survival and opportunity. Sarah's $4.2 million was structured like an individual's portfolio, spread across assets that she hoped would perform well over time. But institutions would never structure capital that way. An institution with $4.2 million would allocate roughly $2 million into true liquidity, assets that provide stability, accessibility, and leverage capacity without market correlation. Then they'd use that stable foundation as collateral to acquire income-producing assets that generate predictable cash flow. The result? 2 income streams instead of gambling on one. The stable asset keeps compounding safely while the income-producing assets generate cash flow regardless of market performance. This is why institutional players sleep well during market crashes. Their income doesn't depend on stock prices. Their growth doesn't stop during recessions. And their capacity to acquire assets actually increases when everyone else is selling. But here's what happens when you try to explain this to most financial advisors. They don't know what you're talking about because they're trained to sell products and collect fees, not engineer institutional grade stability. They'll tell you to rebalance quarterly, add some bonds for safety, maybe throw in some REITs for diversification. But that's hoping and that's praying. That's not engineering. The $3 million trap exists because high earners use retail strategies for institutional-sized problems. You can't solve a structural problem with a performance solution. Now, if you're thinking, man, this sounds complicated, or I don't have access to institutional tools, I completely understand that reaction. You've been told that institutional level wealth management requires institutional level complexity, that you need a family office or $50 million before you can access these strategies. That's not true. That's just effective marketing by the wealth management industry. The actual structure is elegant in its simplicity. It's not about complexity. It's about sequence and engineering. Stack, shield, scale. That's exactly why I created the war chest principle. I'm Christopher Hemmert, and I founded this system after working with ultra high income earning entrepreneurs who were doing all the right things, yet they still felt financially vulnerable. What I realized was that they didn't need higher returns. They needed institutional engineering. The war chest principle exists to help people like you think like an institution, so you can finally reclaim your time, protect your capital, and create something that survives you. Here's the framework that breaks you out of the $3 million trap. Stack. Stack means redirect earned income into true liquidity. Capital that meets all 4 of the institutional criteria simultaneously. Not gambling on market performance, not hoping real estate appreciates. Contractually guaranteed tax-advantaged assets that compound without interruption and can be leveraged without penalties. Most high-income earners skip this entirely. They go straight from earned income to investments, which means they're building on quicksand instead of bedrock. Institutions never skip the foundation. They establish engineered liquidity first, then leverage it strategically. That's why they survive every crisis while individuals panic and sell at exactly the wrong time. Shield. Shield means leverage that true liquidity without selling it to acquire income-producing assets that generate real cash flow. This is where most people misunderstand leverage entirely. They think leverage means risk. Institutions know leverage means velocity when structured correctly. When you borrow against true liquidity that continues compounding, you're not interrupting your wealth creation. You're accelerating it. Your original capital keeps growing while borrowed funds produce additional income streams. Scale. Scale means the reinvestment of cash flow, tax savings, and investment profits back into the acquiring of more income-producing assets without needing additional earned income to fund the growth. This is how you start buying back your time. Instead of needing to work to fund every next step, your assets fund themselves. The system runs independently of your hours and your effort, freeing you from the treadmill. This is where transformation happens. You stop trading time for money and you start engineering money to work independently of your time and effort. Sarah's problem wasn't insufficient capital. Her problem was structural. She had accumulated assets, but she hadn't engineered a system. If Sarah were to restructure her approach using stack, shield, scale, everything would change. Her cash flow would no longer depend on market performance. Her growth wouldn't pause during downturns. And most importantly, her security would come from engineering, not speculation. That's the difference between accumulation and architecture. The $3 million trap catches people who confuse big account balances with engineered wealth systems. But wealth isn't about portfolio size. It's about cash flow reliability and structural sustainability. You don't need $100 million to engineer like an institution. You need the right framework and the discipline to implement it systematically. Stack, shield, scale. It's not complex. It's engineered, as a matter of fact. Some of you are probably thinking, this sounds interesting, but I don't have access to institutional tools. I'm not managing billions of dollars. Here's what most people don't realize. The tools institutions use for engineered liquidity or true liquidity are available to you right now. You've just never been shown how to structure them properly. When a life insurance company needs stable, compounding liquidity, what do they use? They leverage their own high-quality bond portfolio, some cash and short-term investments, policy loans, and commercial mortgage loans. When they need predictable income, they acquire commercial real estate, private credit, and other cash-flowing assets. These aren't exotic instruments reserved for billionaires. They're the same tools that you can access. If you understand institutional engineering principles, the difference isn't the tools, it's the approach. Most people invest in real estate hoping for appreciation. Institutions acquire real estate for the predictable cash flow and use the depreciation to offset taxable income from other sources. Most people chase private equity returns. Institutions use private credit to generate steady income while others chase volatile performance. Same tools, completely different engineering. Here's the particular process that the Rockefeller family used to implement their institutional structure. You start with a properly structured cash value life insurance policy that maximizes liquidity engineering. This becomes your stack, your engineered foundation that meets all 4 institutional criteria. Once you've built sufficient value, you borrow against it to acquire carefully vetted income-producing assets, commercial real estate, private lending, other cash-flowing investments that meet specific return and stability requirements. The policy loan, in the Rockefeller's situation, would typically cost between 4 to 6% annually, but their cash value continued earning dividends as if they never borrowed. Meanwhile, the income-producing assets generated 6 to 10% cash flow. So they earned the spread, plus they continued their compounding, plus the tax advantages from both structures. This isn't theory. This is exactly what the Rockefeller family did, along with Walt Disney and countless other wealthy families who have engineered their capital for generations. The only reason you haven't heard about this is because Wall Street can't collect management fees on assets they don't control. But here's the beautiful part. Once you implement this engineering approach, you're not dependent on anyone's performance. You control the assets. You make the decisions. You keep the cash flow. And most importantly, you're not trapped in the performance chase that keeps high earners anxious and exhausted. This is how you escape the $3 million trap, not by accumulating more, but by engineering smarter. If you want to go deeper, I've prepared a private briefing for you at warchestprinciple.com. It walks you through exactly how to engineer a capital system like we've discussed today, one that mirrors institutional liquidity management. You'll also receive a free PDF called How the Wealthy View Earned versus Passive Income. It breaks down the simple rules that wealthy families follow. Earned income is for building the war chest. Passive income is the real paycheck. And principal always stays protected. It also shows the exact 3-step loop they use. Fund a stable asset, leverage it to buy income-producing assets, and then reinvest the cash flow. Plus, it contains the 4-part definition of true liquidity that institutions live by. This isn't about selling you anything. This is about showing you a different way to engineer wealth. One that prioritizes structure over speculation, engineering over hoping, and control over complexity. The information I share there typically costs tens of thousands of dollars when you access it through traditional wealth management firms, assuming they even understand institutional engineering principles. But I believe this knowledge should be accessible to anyone building serious wealth, regardless of whether they have $3 million or $30 million. Because here's what I've learned after working with high-earning entrepreneurs. The trap isn't the amount of capital you've accumulated. The trap is how that capital is structured. At warchestprinciple.com, I break down the entire engineering system and common mistakes that can derail your progress. Most importantly, you'll see how other entrepreneurs just like you have used this framework to escape the performance hamster wheel and finally achieve the time freedom that wealth was supposed to provide. Again, that's warchestprinciple.com. The briefing is completely free, just solid information about institutional wealth engineering and how you can implement it starting today. So let's recap what we've uncovered today. The $3 million trap isn't about having insufficient capital. It's about using retail structure to manage institutional-sized wealth. High earners get trapped because they think like individuals in an institutional game. They optimize for performance instead of engineering structure. They hope for returns instead of creating reliability. Institutions survive every crisis because they don't play the performance game. They engineer systems that compound safely, generate predictable cash flow, and provide true liquidity, the ability to deploy capital without selling assets or timing markets. The solution isn't accumulating more. It's engineering what you already have using stack, shield, and scale. You stack your capital in true liquidity that meets all four of the institutional criteria simultaneously. Then you shield that capital by leveraging it to acquire income-producing assets. And then you scale your wealth by reinvesting the cash flow, the tax savings, and investment profits into acquiring additional productive assets. This approach transforms you from someone who trades time for money at a high level into someone whose money works independently of time and effort. That's what it really means to buy back your time. Your wealth structure gives you the freedom to live and to think and to build on your terms because income continues whether you show up to work or not. You can implement this transformation regardless of whether your net worth is $1 million or $10 million today. The tools exist. The engineering principles are proven and sound. The only question is whether you're ready to stop hoping your portfolio performs and start engineering a system that works regardless of market conditions. Remember, you earned your income. You've earned it. Now it's time to earn your freedom by thinking bigger, structuring smarter, and protecting the one thing you can't get back, your time. If you're ready to learn exactly how to engineer this system, visit warchestprinciple.com and I'll show you the complete blueprint. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. God bless.